My name is Sam Shamash, that's my Canadian name, but my real name is Salman bin Ezra bin Azuri bin Meneshi Moshe Shamash. I'm an Iraqi Jew born in Iraq. So in Iraq, what we do, we mention the father's name and grandparents, etc. And born in 1955 in Baghdad, Iraq. Our community goes back to Kingdom of David from when the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar destroyed finally the Kingdom of David and brought back the strongest men and the nicest looking women, and that's what our civilization come from. And we go back about 2,800 years. So we were there in Iraq about 800 years to 1,000 years before Islam, which was approximately 500 after Christ. The Iraqi communities was treated very well by the Persians, Cyrus the Great, who occupied Babylonia. We also were treated well by the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire occupied Iraq, Syria, Lebanon for about 500 years, and they asked for the Jews to come in to the Ottoman Empire, especially the Jews from Spain and Portugal, because they were trying to increase the trade, especially along the Silk Route with China and England. And Baghdad is on the Silk Route. So as a matter of fact, about 1910, 1920, third of Baghdad was Jewish. So after the Ottoman Empire, when it was defeated by the British, there was a kingdom, and about a third of the ministers in Iraq were Jewish. And of course, a lot of the medical doctors, professors, scientists, there's a vast majority. People in banking, there was mostly Jews. The prosecution of Jews in Iraq started in 1939, 1940. So that's even before the start of Israel in 1948, so it had nothing to do with the 6 Days War. What happened is that the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, and he was a pro-Nazi sympathizer, was kicked out by the British in around 1939, and he came to Baghdad. He convinced a lot of the laymen in Iraq who are not well educated that Jews was bad. So we had a first pogrom against the Jews in Baghdad in around 1939. It lasted about a week. The British at the beginning didn't do anything, and there was a lot of people who got killed, about, I don't know exact number, but it's about 200. And there were lots of women got raped, and a lot of houses were destroyed, and assets and furniture were stolen. And then the British, after a lot of pressure, decided to stop it. After 1939, there was a good sized migration, but also after 1948, where Iraq was one of the armies that wanted to attack Israel, and they were defeated. The Iraqi army was in Jordan, supporting the Jordanians. There was a big embarrassment, and they allowed the Jews to leave in 1949, 50, 51. And that was the fast Jewish Iraqi community when they left Iraq. Probably 80% of the 250,000 Jewish Iraqis left. So perhaps 200,000 people left. A lot of them went to Israel, some went to Iran, some went to India, some went to China and Japan, and of course some went to America, US, Canada, and UK. But the vast majority did go to Israel, and they did Aliyah with Israel. They had a tough time at the beginning, being in tents, and they had no assets. They had to leave all their assets in Iraq, their houses, their banking, and they left with practically just their clothes. My father decided at that time to leave because he wanted to wait and see what happens to the Iraqi Jews in Israel. The initial reports that he got were not very good. They were there was a little bit of differences with the Ashkenazi in Israel. They were having problem settlement. So the conditions were not good. Of course, Israel was a new country. They don't have much money. But he decided to stay. And that was a mistake. Because what happened, there was a revolution. Saddam Hussein came in. He came in 1969. He was a prime minister, but the main thing, he was in charge of the secret police. And that's where the second set of prosecution and torture and happening is the Iraqi Jews. At that time, probably there was only 10,000 left, including our family. Our family, my father was about 20 years older than my mother, which is the norm if you talk about weddings that happened 80 years ago in Iraq. They were introduced by what we call a dalala, which is a matchmaker, which was the tradition at that time. And I have 8 siblings. They had 8 children. I'm number 5. So the first child, Kamal, left in the good times and he went to Scotland to study medicine, and that's it. Then my second brother, Stephen, he was Sabah, his real name. He was a very smart student, and he was probably one of the smartest in Iraq. He's a walking encyclopedia, but the Jews, when he graduated, were not allowed to go to Iraqi universities, were not allowed to work, and were not allowed to be educated. So he took some technical courses like fixing cars, fixing engines, and electrical. He didn't work, but just to get his mind occupied. And then he ran away, like majority of the Jews then, through Iran. Iran at that time was a Shah kingdom, and the Shah of Iran supported the Jews. So what the Iraqi Jews who were escaping, what happened, they were supported and aided by the Kurds in northern Iraq. We paid them, and they will drive us up at night without the light, crossing the northern mountains in Iraq to the Persian Iran borders. At the Iran borders, there was United Jewish Appeal that supported us and took us over. But the reason they had to do it at night, because the Iraqi military governments were attacking the Kurds at that time. Anyway, so I would say perhaps 3,000 Jews ran away this way. My father did not run away, and he stayed. And there's probably about 2,000 Jews left around early 70s. Now, Saddam Hussein and the whole media was against the Jewish and anti-Semitic, unfortunately. And the Iraqi populations was the majority. Not all of them were anti-Semitic, because, as I said, they're not as well educated, they don't get internet, and they don't have radio. TV was restricted for outside of the Arab countries. So you were not allowed to watch BBC of Lebanon, for example, and that was a high risk. In 1971, what happened is Saddam Hussein was pro-Khomeini, but he did a deal with the Shah, where the Shah stopped arming the Kurds. Saddam Hussein stopped arming the Khomeini regime, which was anti-Shah, and backstabbed Khomeini. So Khomeini was kicked out of Iraq, Baghdad, and he went to Paris. And from there, he continued with the revolution against the Shah and was successful. And he went back to Iran in 1971, become the leader, and became a religious Islamic country. Of course, one of the first things he did, Khomeini, was start a war with Saddam Hussein, because he was insulted because Saddam backstabbed him. So Saddam's number one enemy became Iran, and there was a brutal war. About 2 million people died from our understanding, and not 1 inch was gained. And a lot of young Iranians died during that war, because Iraqis would wait with machine guns in marshes, and the Khomeini would send all these young people believing in afterlife and virgins and life after death, unfortunately. But the main thing what happened because of this war, Saddam reduced his animosity to Jews, because his number one enemy now is Iran and the Khomeini regime. and he allowed the Jews to travel. So personally, I traveled on a passport, and I had to have only 5 dinars, which is the equivalent at that time of maybe $50. And that's it. No other cash, no other assets. And I bought a two-way ticket to Beirut, Lebanon. My mother gave me her gold bracelet, which was very expensive, and I was 17-year-old. And when I got a taxi from the airport, I asked him to take me to a jeweler. I'm sure I got cheated. And I sold it, I believe, for like $300. And that got me a ticket to London, where I met my uncle and then my brothers in Canada. By that time, the doctor and Sabah sent me some money and I went to Canada. I did not like London, although we had acceptance. I had acceptance from Oxford University. The Jews of Baghdad were very well educated. We went to a private school called Frank Haney, which was, we used the French Alliance system and the British GOC system. So we were educated in good English, good French, good Arabic, of course, and Hebrew. So almost all of us had 4 languages. My sisters knew 7 languages, but the main ones were those 4 languages. So we had pretty good marks, and I had some A levels in GOC British system, and I decided to go to Montreal, where my brother was there, and I loved Montreal. And I spoke French better than English at that time, and decided to go to Sir George Williams University. What happened 3 months after I left, my sister got married to Claire Shamash, got married to Dawood Sassoon. And after that, I don't know what happened, but Saddam Hussein and the secret police decided to kidnap some Iraqi men. They kidnapped 15 men, I believe, on one weekend, and all Jewish men, and these Jewish men have never heard from. So my father, witnesses said that he was put in one of the secret police cars, and we tried to find him, and nobody heard from them again. We knew one Muslim lawyer who was well connected with the government, and he thought he heard information that they went to one prison, that nobody comes up alive. Unfortunately, when my family, I was not there, when my 2 sisters and 2 younger brothers, at that time they were 10 and 8, they went to my father's office in the souk, which is the market. The safe was opened and empty. So my father, of course, didn't trust the Iraqi banks, so he didn't put any assets in the bank. He put jewelry, diamonds, gold. He was a goldsmith at one time, and then he changed to become a tea and sugar merchant. And but he was reasonably well off, not very wealthy, but reasonably. But all my mother's jewelries and all the gold and diamonds was disappeared, and we lost all the assets. So about 3 months after that, my mother and my 2 sisters, my 2 brothers, kept trying to connect with him or find information with no use. They decided to travel. They got airline tickets and left. And most of them ended up in Israel, and that's what happened with my family story.